From the studios of KENW on the campus of Eastern New Mexico University, it's You Should Know, featuring the people and events of Eastern New Mexico and West Texas.
Welcome to You Should Know. I'm your host, Evelyn Ledbetter, and today I have not only a great guy that we've heard on the radio for a long time, but also he's new here at KENW, or actually FM. So you are our news director and also public relations.
You bet.
Well, welcome.
Thanks for having me on.
For sure. So, we always wonder, we were talking about this the other day, you always wonder what people look like that are on radio. So we're cheating you a little bit. We're giving out you get the behind the scenes look in front of the cameras now.
I don't necessarily know if that's a positive, but I think that's the whole thing. The beauty of radio is that it's a non-visual medium. So, but people are curious. I think it's human nature to want to know the guy coming out of this box, what does he look like?
Yeah, and you always want to see, is the person you pictured, is that what they look like in front of in real life? Because you visualize sometimes something very different than what you see.
I've been here at KNW for just over a week. So early is good, because then otherwise people will get an idealized idea of who I am in their heads, and then they meet me, and then you're setting up the letdown.
Oh, come on. Well, Kevin, I want you to share. Tell us a little bit about your background. Are you a native to Portales or your home life?
I am not. I was born and raised in Western Indiana, and I moved primarily because before I came along, my parents had lived in El Paso and had fallen in love with it. And so
you don't hear that often.
You don't hear that, right? But they were really they wanted to get back there. And once I think I was into junior high, that's when that move was made, and went to El Paso, and that's where I ultimately graduated high school from. And I went in the U.S. Marines from there and served for about 6 years, and then that got me back in this region, because by that time my mother had retired and moved to Ruidoso, so I got out and needed somewhere to go. Ruidoso sounded fine to me. And then that's when the wheels really started turning, because I had attended ENMU on the GI Bill. And once I had reached a certain point there, the dean that we had at the time said, "You're going to have to move to Portales to finish this degree."
And so you were doing ENMU Ruidoso,
yes,
the campus
I was,
there.
yeah.
Okay.
And but I had to come to the main campus out of necessity to finish it all off, and I just never left. So, and that was a long time ago.
And what did you go into in your degree? Was it in broadcast or journalism, or what did you do?
It was not. No. I began with a history major and a biology minor, which in the grand scheme of things makes no sense at all. And the biology minor was kind of causing some roadblocks for me. And I had one summer session, a fall semester, and a spring semester remaining, and decided to then make a change and add a political science major, so a dual major. The political science side of it, primarily because I was taking a lot of upper division political science classes for fun to fill, I believe elective credit was what they called it at the time. And as a result, I ended up graduating with a dual history and political science BS degree.
So were you thinking you were going to teach or go into law or go into politics, or what was your plans?
I didn't actually know. I didn't have a plan in place. I actually began a master's program in the Department of Education, giving some thought to getting licensure and then getting a master's and going the route of education. But that didn't pan out because I got a job. I got a job in radio.
All of a sudden you wanted to eat something besides ramen noodles.
Well, there is that. I got a job in broadcasting at that time. And I had that, I was at that crossroads. So you can either get a master's or you can get a job. You can't do both because of the time requirements by both. Working a full-time job or being a full-time student.
Well, there wasn't night classes, I'm going to guess. I mean, there was night classes, there wasn't online. That made it much more difficult.
That was the problem, especially if you're working on education, because you're expected to be able to give your all into that program, and most of it's going to be during the day.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's really opened a lot of opportunities for people with the online for graduate school. But you found a passion in the radio. Obviously, you took the job and got started.
I started in commercial radio in February of 2001. So, almost 24 and a half years ago. I began because I wanted to get into farm broadcasting. It was a passion to me. My grandfather was a farmer. Mm-hmm. My father was a farmer at one time, and in varying capacities. My grandfather was a real hardcore, dating back to the Great Depression, farmer in rural Indiana, mm-hmm. where everybody was losing their farms over that period. He managed to be one of the few that didn't really lose his. My father had done a little bit of little dairy farming in northern Minnesota before I came along, and it just made sense to me. I thought, well, this is clearly in our blood. This is maybe a thing I'll do. I didn't know so much about radio because realistically, the only real influencing factor I'd had was an obscure TV show from the 70s and 80s by the name of WKRP in Cincinnati. Sounds like I'm making that up. I'm not. I loved it as a child.
I did too.
Really and truly influenced me. I can remember a few different Christmases or birthdays, I believe. I had two nephews who were very, very close to my age because I came along very, very late. And I can recall when we were probably 8 or 9, 10 years old, and we would do I didn't know the name of it then, but I know it now. And we would do air checks. We would absolutely throw it to music or walk it back, talk it, to talk fill and everything else. We were doing that as children. So to say that might have had an influence, it clearly did.
Yeah, something was drawing you to that.
And I would absorb radio just through my pores. It was certainly a passion, and I hadn't even gotten my toes wet in it yet. So when I was afforded that opportunity, it took more than 24 years to get me out of that position from commercial radio to public radio, which is realistically, it's two sides of the same coin. It always really just comes down to revenue and what's allowed and what's not allowed. There are various rules that are in place, but I think coming out of the upbringing that I'd had and the passion I'd put into it, and I'd got hired on as a farm news director.
I was going to ask what your first position was.
That was it. Which then became, well, would you also be willing to do a morning drive show? Because it would just follow on the heels of that. So I'd do the agricultural broadcast. Then I would move it into a morning drive, the wacky FM DJ guy, and various other capacities over the years. And eventually I'd been out there about 5 years, I think, 6 years. It was 5. And that was when I was afforded the opportunity to become the news director out there. Now, I didn't really change up any of the roles. I was still doing...
You were doing both?
I was still doing morning farm broadcasts. I was still doing a morning drive show, and I was doing the news. But the news and I didn't think that would be a thing that I would have any interest in, but it kind of caught me flat-footed when I realized this is really where I need to be.
Well, with your major in history and political science, you definitely... That kind of gives you a clue that probably is where your interest may be more so.
You can make that argument. You really can. I've only been on the job a short while here and back into, and for the first time ever, actually being solely just in news, in public affairs, instead of handling a couple of other things as you have to do if you're in small market radio.
Sure.
But news is kind of where, now that I'm back into it again, it feels like I'm a weird homecoming of sorts.
Do you miss, you had mentioned in one of our conversations that when they took you out of being news director and back into the morning show, for the majority, the two personalities, they didn't feel like that was a blend, that you could be more humorous and laid back, and that maybe didn't give the right look as your news director.
Well, I think there's actually a lot to be said about that. Because as humans, we know we can handle multiple jobs.
Right.
We can do very different things. And if this job requires me to be serious, I can be serious. If this one requires me to be whimsical, I can be whimsical. It's fine. But the problem comes then of what you're presenting to those that consume your material, which are the listeners. Does a listener need to hear you do a story on like a homicide or some tragic event in the afternoon, but then hear you making jokes in the next morning.
Right.
It might be a bit of an ask in that case, because you're kind of filling out somebody else's expectations of who you are and what you present.
Well, some of your Johnny Carson, you probably wouldn't have taken quite as serious as your Walter Cronkite. So,
there's something to be said about
just
that.
two different personalities that we're seeing on that. So, well, and this is a large service area. I mean, not only the difference into commercial, but into public radio. And like you said, the differences on FCC requirements of we can't do a call to action and things like that, like on a commercial. So much different on the financial side of it, for sure.
But, I mean, when you start talking about where the revenue flows are at, commercial radio, you can sell airtime to anybody and promote their business.
Right.
And I mean, that's ultimately, at the end of the day, that's really kind of what your job is.
Right.
Whereas it's more community-based at the public side, thus the pledge drives and everything else, all the efforts that are made out here at KENW and public radio and TV across the country, of trying to make sure that you're bringing in enough to be able to fulfill kind of what your task is, your mission.
Sure. Yeah, the very difference where we don't do those call to actions, and I think the news stories can be a lot more in depth than on commercial stations. They can dig into them a little deeper. But our service area, I mean, the station you came from was a much smaller reach than what we have on KENW FM.
I thought it was a pretty broad reach until I began here, and it's a massive area. Population-wise, it's still it's a massive coverage area with a kind of a small population. When you start really looking at all the figures from border to border and the entire coverage area of basically Raton to Carlsbad, Ruidoso into some of the counties in West Texas, and that's a huge area.
That's a big footprint.
There's a lot of tumbleweeds and a lot of cows.
There is. I think I told you the story that I had a listener call and thought we were off the air, and it was just because of weather. We couldn't get up to the top of the mountain to do some repairs. And they said, this is where we listen to a news program once a day, and we go to a certain pasture to feed, and because there's a show we like to listen to. And people don't realize that public radio does reach areas that, if you're commercial, you're not going to have very many customers buying ads.
Well, it's not financially viable.
In the middle of nowhere.
Sure, that makes perfect sense.
So that is a big deal. Well, how do you plan to, I know that is such a big area because I work my main job is also FM.
Sure.
What is your plans to try to integrate and make the connections within from Raton to Carlsbad and almost into like Morton and almost into Littlefield and things like that?
We have to make it worth their while. The listener has to be, if it's never anything that involves them, then there is no commitment on their part. There's no engagement. In order to keep those various communities relevant, you have to make sure that you're reporting on the things that are valid. It comes down to there are only so many minutes in a newscast. So does that mean that sometimes something I might have out there that somebody would have been just thrilled that we had got the story out, but then it eventually ends up getting relegated into a later newscast, if at all, and because it gets supplanted by something of a far bigger consequence. Unfortunately, that's just the realities of broadcasting.
So tell me the challenges or what you see. Like for here, you've made so many contacts living in this community for basically almost 25 years. How do you think you'll do that same thing in this large of an area?
I think it comes down to the same thing. It's human contact. I understand we're talking to them out of the ether, as it were. I understand, but personal contact is always that remains the big factor for humans to reach out to each other, know who it is, be able to identify who they are by visually, and have a conversation with them, and let them know what you're there to do. And in the capacity of a news director, that means I'm reaching out. I'll have to be reaching out to city managers. I'll have to be reaching out to directors of chambers of commerce and other organizations. And you have to think of in terms of some of these groups, they don't have the affordability to buy a schedule on commercial radio. Sometimes the only real outreach that they get to be able to get it out there over the public airwaves is through public radio. And in this case, I mean, because you go to thinking about scouting, there's no budget for trying to get the word out. They're operating on the grace of people to be able to get the word out for them in a lot of cases. And I think that's one of the things that KENW does very, very well through community calendars and things outside of just the basic structure of a newscast.
Well, and that is something, if people aren't aware, on our station we do. Our chamber directors from the cities that we serve call in once a week. They have that option to do that and tell us what's going on. And that is something that you do get through KENW FM that you're not going to get on a commercial station, is that free airtime to do that. So,
and I'll say for those that like, well, I haven't seen this guy yet. You haven't, but you will.
Okay.
I will make my way around in every area that we cover with KENW. I intend to get out and meet the people that kind of make your communities work and get a connection there.
Well, and I'm sure that you would love for people to reach out to you and make a contact as well, if contact the station and
Absolutely.
if they have things and stories that they want to do. Tell me what are the things that take priority on a story, just like you talked?
Well, it's the sad reality is that bad news sells, and it really does. And unfortunately, it comes down to prioritization. What's the bad one that you can talk about? That's often what it's going to be, because that's what everybody wants to know about. The thing that's going to be probably most gossiped about in various communities in this side of the state, that's probably what everybody wants to know about, because gossip isn't exactly trustworthy.
No.
So you've got to get, unfortunately, you're going to have bad things that happen to bad people, and that's probably going to be your lead, followed by things that are maybe a little less bad. But if it's in the scope of public safety, food recalls, things of that nature, missing persons, or that has to fall on the next priority.
Weather situations.
Things that, well, and especially now after we've seen a lot of the tragedies out of the Hill Country in Texas and out of what's going on in Lincoln County and here in New Mexico.
And Las Vegas as well.
Las Vegas has
had tons of
everybody
floods
out
and
west
fires.
has had some flooding issues here in the last couple of months. So absolutely, that's going to bring some weight to a newscast. So then when it's the feel-good, somebody's doing a bake sale,
that's probably not going to take the lead.
It's going to get moved down the list, and unfortunately, it may or may not get any coverage.
But the one thing we do, we offer a community calendar every day. And for the nonprofit things, we do have some announcements on that, and that gives you a way to get that information out there without taking the news time. What news segments do you do? What are the times that you'll do your news programs?
Now, I'm in the scope of other programming that we have on KNW FM, but I do have a 4:30, well, it's a little after 4:30, but it's 4:33, if we want to be really technical, PM, 4:33 and 5:33, and it falls into All Things Considered.
Okay.
And then in the mornings, 5:33, 6:33, and 7:33 a.m., so there are 5 newscasts broken out throughout the day. How many of those are unique? Well, the longer I'm in this position, the more I aim for that to be the case, that each one of them is unique to themselves. But sometimes if it's 5:33 in the morning, it'll probably be the same one as 6:33 for a little bit until I kind of get my legs under me and kind of really get into the role where I'm at now.
Well, and something else that goes along with that, people may not realize you're a one-man person in this position. So trying to get news in from all over, it's hard. You can't be everywhere. And to be here 7 days a week, 24/7 is not an option either.
I like that when people say, so tell us a little about your news department. Well, I guess it's just going to be autobiographical because I am the news department.
You are.
In a way. I mean, now there are some crossover efforts, certainly redundant efforts that happen, between TV side and radio side, and obviously in your role with the FM. I think it's a team effort. Realistically, anybody down the hall, hey, did you catch this? Maybe I didn't. I don't stay up on every possible breaking news story from everywhere because I'm just one person.
You're one person, right. Where are your sources that you get a lot of your news?
I get some of it directly, and that comes from people in elected positions, those that are or appointed, as the case may be. When we get past that, then I begin looking actually into other notable news agencies, and a lot of that comes out of public radio. But then you have others that are independent sources. Source New Mexico is kind of up on the list. You've got, your political reports that are out there, and commonly those are ones that are going to be under a lot of scrutiny. So oftentimes you can really, really put a little bit of faith in them if you've kind of really trusted and then evaluated and seen where their information is at. But the New Mexico Political Report is vital in that as well. Texas Public Radio, a lot of these others, and if you hear me say public radio a lot, it's primarily because of the role where I'm at now. But that doesn't mean that I also would not grab something. If somebody out of Albuquerque, one of the commercial TV stations there, if they have something I think is very, very compelling and very, very useful to us, absolutely.
Right.
I just make sure to attribute it to the right people,
to give them
point
credit.
out where I got the information from, and roll with it from there.
Thoughts on, a lot of people get their news anymore from social media. Your thoughts on, obviously it's not fact checked. People can write anything. But those, that what we were talking, if it bleeds, it leads, is that old term. A lot of things pop up on social media of the bad things before it ever hits anywhere else.
But I think that confirms what I'd said. People want to they want to see the absolute disaster at the top. Back in the old days when print was running the world, it was like, it's got to be above the fold. This is what we require. That's why, and I think social media absolutely bears that out. Yeah.
And you just have to dig in a little deeper, and you're obviously not going to just report on something you read on.
No, verification
is a really good thing.
It has to be there, because otherwise you're setting yourself up for a dramatic fall.
And the thoughts, we're seeing newspapers that are either disappearing or going down to once a week print. Do you think radio will stay relevant?
I do, only because of what our mission is. And our mission is to get out word to people at a moment's notice. When there is a tragedy that's developing, it's not going to be so easy to be in the field, write that story, get it back to your publisher, get it printed, get it into the next day's paper, because by that time, whatever the facts of that at that moment in time might have been are no longer relevant. That's the possibility. Whereas in radio, you have the ability to put somebody on the scene and be able to get the word out exactly what's going on, and allow them to utilize their ability to tell the tale of what's before them in a non-visual media, but to offer it completely without bias. It's a matter of just stating truth.
Right.
That's realistically all it is. And presenting the truth to the people for them to consume in their own way.
And presenting truth on both sides.
Absolutely.
Keep that balanced. And I really don't even know how you vote. And I don't think you plan to tell me that way. And I try to stay the same. There's both sides to stories.
I think it's compelling when no one knows how you vote.
They wonder. And if you just stick to the facts. So something else we have is the emergency alert system. And obviously on radio, that's something that's the first thing you start leaning towards, because your Wi-Fi may go out, but lots of times those radio waves get through when nothing else does. And
when you start looking at what had happened, we'd referenced earlier about the flooding down in the Texas Hill Country. That's absolutely one of the things that's still a valid news topic right now, and that is, how do we let more people know? Because there's some speculation that perhaps it could have been done better.
Right.
As all tragedies, I think, generally are. When you go back and you look through everything and what could have been done differently, what could we have done better, more alert is better. So the EAS system as we have it here in New Mexico, as I'm aware of it, that is the express purpose of that, is that when bad things are coming, you can go to your radio.
And hopefully it comes on. So we're winding down. We don't have much time, but tell me what your goal is here at KENW-FM.
The goal is to still make those same connections that I always have that were in a much smaller area, but to be able to broaden that out and to be able to meet with the decision makers and find out the people that are in the headlines for good or bad, and figure out who they are and what that particular story is and what it's going to require. And some things it's going to very much be a matter of tracking down information of bad guys. Okay, well, this person got incarcerated. Okay, I'm telling their story, probably not to the degree that they would prefer. But when you do have those stories of this kid made it to this on a national level,
Right.
or this sports team did this, if I have room to be able to utilize that, and that reaffirms our connection with that community, I think that that's a vital interest to us as a radio group and also to them as a community.
Well, Kevin, I thought this was a great way to introduce you to our viewers, and then this will air on FM as well. But we're excited about you being here at the station and bringing all of your years of experience and being able to work with you and learn.
Thank you so much.
So thanks for being here with us. And to all of you joining us today, thank you, and we will see you next time. Cheers.